Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to Midnight Affairs Tales. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world you are watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. The Call That Shattered Everything. The buzzing ripped through the silence. Colton Briggs jerked upright, still half in uniform, boots caked with desert dust. He snatched the phone off the nightstand, heart already hammering. It was a local number. He answered. "Is this Sergeant Briggs?" A woman's voice asked, sharp and clipped. "Yes. There has been an incident. Your daughter, Piper Briggs, has been admitted to Mercy General Hospital. You need to come immediately." The world narrowed to a pinpoint. His voice cracked. "What happened?" "I am sorry, sir. She was assaulted." Colton's keys hit the floor. He did not bother picking them up. He grabbed his jacket and bolted from the motel room. The night air in Idaho bit into his skin as he climbed into his truck, hands trembling too hard to fit the key into the ignition on the first try. The drive blurred past in streaks of headlights and broken prayers. "Piper. God, please hold on." Mercy General loomed ahead, all cold glass and pale lights. He skidded into a parking spot, running before the engine even shut off. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry bees. A nurse met him at the counter. "Mr. Briggs, where is she?" His voice snapped like a whip. "Follow me." Down sterile hallways that smelled of bleach and fear. Around a corner. Through swinging doors. Then he saw her. Piper was a bundle of wires and bruises. Her face swollen beyond recognition. A halo of dried blood tangled in her hair. Colton stumbled back a step, while rising in his throat. "Who did this to her?" he rasped. The nurse lowered her gaze. "We do not know yet." He touched Piper's limp hand. It felt small, so breakable. His fingers brushed something clenched tight in hers. A broken necklace chain, stained dark. A storm gathered in his chest, black and thundering. He had fought in wars across oceans. But nothing had prepared him for this battlefield. He gripped the broken chain, jaw tightening. Who? And when he found out, what would he become to get justice? Before we move ahead, I just want to say, your support truly means everything. We're building something special here, and our next big goal is reaching 10,000 incredible subscribers. If you're feeling the emotions in these stories, imagine what's still to come. Subscribe now, be part of this amazing journey, and let's keep growing together. Your one click can make a real difference. Let's continue the story. The room buzzed with the hum of machines, each beep a reminder of how close Piper danced to the edge. Colton did not sleep. He stood vigil by her side, fists clenching and unclenching, the broken chain still wrapped tight in his palm. Marla arrived at dawn. She staggered in, makeup smeared, smelling faintly of cheap perfume and stale cigarettes. When her eyes landed on Piper's battered form, she froze. What happened to her?" Marla croaked. Colton turned slowly. His stare was ice. "You tell me." "I do not know. She stammered. "I was at the pit with some friends. I had no idea." The lie was too smooth, too quick. Colton had seen enough men lie under pressure to know the signs. Marla's trembling hands. The twitch at the corner of her mouth. "You left her alone?" His voice barely rose above a whisper, but it cracked through the room like gunfire. I needed a break." Marla wailed. "You do not understand, Colton. You were gone." He took a step toward her. "Gone, fighting for you." "For her." Marla crumbled onto a plastic chair, sobbing into her hands. But Colton's eyes stayed hard. The soldier in him recognized something else at work here, not grief. Fear. A doctor came in then, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Briggs, can we speak outside?" Colton followed, keeping Piper in his sight until the last possible second. In the hallway, under the harsh flicker of fluorescent lights, the doctor kept his voice low. "Your daughter was attacked by more than one person. Based on the injuries, it was not random." Colton's hands curled into fists so tight, his nails bit into his palms. "Do you have enemies?" the doctor asked cautiously. Colton stared at him. "I do now." He turned back toward Piper's door, the broken chain digging into his fingers, drawing blood. And he made a promise, silent but unshakable. I will find out. I will make them pay. But first, who would tell the first lie? The sun clawed its way into the sky, throwing pale light across Mercy General's battered windows. Colton did not flinch at the morning brightness. He sat motionless, staring at the fractured figure of his daughter. Marla had slipped out sometime during the night, claiming she needed to get clothes. She had not come back. Good. Colton rose and moved to the edge of the bed. Piper stirred slightly, the faintest twitch of her fingers. A flicker of life. A whisper of hope. A nurse entered, setting a tray down. She paused, glancing at the broken chain wrapped around his fingers. She would not let it go, the nurse said gently. Even unconscious. She held on to it. Colton nodded, throat tight. You saw her come in? The nurse hesitated, looked around, lowered her voice. Sir, between you and me, they said she was dumped at the back door. No ambulance. No explanation. Colton's heart twisted. Who brought her? 2 men. Never gave their names. Security cameras caught their truck, but the footage is blurry. They were in a rush to get out. Colton's mind raced. 2 men. A truck. Fear in their actions. A broken chain. Nothing about this was random. He left Piper's room and walked straight to the hospital's small security office. The guard on duty, a pot-bellied man who smelled of old coffee, shrugged when Colton demanded the footage. Privacy laws, man. Colton leaned in, voice lethal. I am not asking. Minutes later, Colton stood alone, replaying the grainy footage. A battered gray pickup. 2 shadows heaving Piper's limp body out, dumping her like garbage, speeding off. And one thing more. In the reflection of the truck's broken mirror, a sticker. The Pit. A local bar. Colton's jaw locked. He knew where to start hunting. He turned away from the screen, heart pounding like war drums. There would be no forgiveness. Only reckoning. The Pit was a scar on the edge of town. A sinking roof. Rusted neon lights buzzing like flies. The kind of place where secrets rotted alongside the beer. Colton pulled up across the street and killed the engine. The broken sticker in the hospital footage matched the one peeling off the front window here. He sat for a moment, breathing slow. Watching. 2 men staggered out the front door, drunk, laughing too loud. The third man stayed behind the bar, wiping down a counter already clean. Colton stepped out into the cold night, boots crunching gravel. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and bad intentions. A jukebox whined somewhere in the back. Half a dozen heads turned as he entered, sizing him up. Some looked away fast. Some stared too long. He walked to the bar, every step controlled, deliberate. The bartender, a wiry man with a biker's beard and tired eyes, glanced up. What can I get you? A name, Colton said. The bartender froze, then forced a smile. You are not a cop. I do not owe you. Colton leaned in, close enough for the man to smell the desert on him. My daughter was dumped at Mercy General 2 nights ago, beaten half to death. She had your sticker clenched in her fist. The room seemed to shrink. The bartender licked his lips. Look, man, I do not know. Colton's hand flashed out, grabbing the man's wrist. Not hard enough to break it, just enough to remind him he could. Try again. Murmurs rippled through the bar. Some patrons slipped out quietly. Finally, the bartender sighed. Maybe she saw something she shouldn't have. Denny Rawls and his boys. They do not like witnesses. Denny, Colton repeated. The name tasted like acid. The bartender nodded once. He runs the garage out on Highway 6. Stay away, man. You have no idea what you are messing with. Colton released his wrist and straightened up. Oh, I know exactly what I am messing with, he said. He walked out without another word, feeling every eye in the bar crawl across his back. War had just been declared, and Colton Briggs did not lose wars. The Rawls Auto Garage sat like a vulture's nest at the edge of town. Rusted cars stacked like bones. A few were burned out, windows shattered, tires stripped. Colton parked down the road, out of sight. He approached on foot, moving like shadow across the frozen dirt. 3 men were laughing by the open bay door, tossing back beers. One was tall and greasy, tattoos snaking down his arms. Another hunched over, wiry and twitchy. The third, Denny Rawls himself, leaned against a battered truck, chewing a toothpick, king of this rotting castle. Colton watched from behind a crumbling wall. His muscles were tense coils, ready to spring. He needed information, not bodies. Not yet. He circled around, slipping into the dark side of the garage where abandoned equipment created a maze of hiding spots. The office window glowed faintly. Inside, he saw movement. Denny counting a wad of cash, throwing bills into a metal drawer. No cameras. No alarms. Only arrogance. Colton waited until the back door creaked open as one of the men went to take a leak behind the building. Opportunity. He moved fast. Silent. Precise. One hand clamped over the man's mouth. The other slammed a knife handle into the side of his head. The man crumpled without a sound. Colton dragged him behind a dumpster, patting him down. Keys. A wallet. A burner phone. He flipped through the phone quickly. Messages. Boss says deal goes down Friday. Girl saw too much. Took care of it. Colton's stomach twisted. They had planned it. Piper had not been random. She had been targeted. He pocketed the phone and faded back into the darkness before anyone noticed. No mistakes. No noise. There was a way to destroy a man louder than bullets. Colton would burn everything Denny Rawls had built, starting with the lies he told. Marla was waiting at the motel when Colton returned. She stood by the door, arms crossed, fake calm layered over panic. Her eyes were too wide. Her foot tapped nervously against the concrete. You are not answering your phone, she snapped. Colton brushed past her without a word, unlocking the door and stepping inside. He left it open behind him. Marla followed, voice rising. Where were you? Working, he said flatly. On what? He turned, stared at her. Her eyes darted away. Guilt, fear, something worse swirling in their depths. You were at the pit the night Piper got hurt, he said. Marla laughed, brittle and high. What? No, Colton, I swear, I was just, save it. He threw the burner phone onto the bed. It bounced once, landing face up, the incriminating message still visible. Marla paled. Her mouth opened. Shut. Opened again. Listen to me, she said quickly, moving toward him. It was not supposed to happen like that. Like what? She wrung her hands. I owed Denny some money. Gambling debts. I thought, if I introduced him to some people, he would wipe it clean. I did not know they would. She clutched at his arm. Colton, I did not know they would touch her. He jerked away from her. The room seemed to tilt, rage sharpening every breath he took. You used our daughter as currency, he whispered. Marla dropped her head, sobbing. I needed out. You needed money, he said, voice colder than the night outside. He turned away from her, fists shaking. Outside, a coyote howled. Inside, something inside Colton Briggs died. Trust. Forgiveness. Whatever part of him believed in redemption shriveled into ash. And as Marla wept behind him, Colton made a silent vow. They were all going to pay, starting with her. The house smelled different when Colton stepped inside. Not the stale scent of neglect it had worn for months. Something worse. Something sour, like desperation soaked into the walls. Marla had vanished again. Good. He moved methodically through the rooms, the soldier's patience still sharp in his blood. In the master bedroom, he started pulling drawers, flipping cushions, peeling back the life they had once shared. Beneath the bed, tucked inside an old shoebox, he found it. A black flip phone. Not hers. Not Piper's. Burner. The screen lit up with a cracked sigh when he pressed the button. Dozens of messages. Meet at the back lot. Bring the girl. She better not talk. You get your cut after. Colton stared at the words until they blurred. The rage that boiled up was not loud. It was cold. Controlled. He kept digging. Underneath the closet floorboards, hidden by a loose plank, he found more. Stacks of cash wrapped in rubber bands. Photos. Photos of Piper at the diner, at school, at the library, all taken from a distance. Someone had been following her. Watching. Planning. His hands shook. He let them. Only for a moment. In the bottom of the box was a silver locket, the same one he had given Marla the night he left for Afghanistan. Inside it now was a picture of Marla and Denny Rawls, cheek to cheek, smiling wide like a couple on vacation. Colton closed the locket slowly. He stood there for a long moment, the weight of betrayal anchoring him to the floor. Everything he had fought for, bled for, sacrificed for, rotted from the inside by the woman he thought he had known. No court, no cops, no mercy. Marla had chosen her side. Now Colton would show her what side he was on. The pit was almost empty when Colton walked in again. A few old men nursed beers at the corner table. The bartender stiffened when he saw him, but said nothing. Fear had already begun to carve its marks into this place. Colton slid onto a stool and ordered nothing. He just waited. Minutes later, a wiry figure slipped through the back door. Eyes darting, posture hunched. Troy Lanes. Mechanic. Drunk. Trash. And, by the way, he flinched when he spotted Colton, guilty as hell. Colton moved first, intercepting him before he could bolt. He clamped a firm hand on Troy's shoulder, steering him into a corner booth. "You know who I am?" Colton asked quietly. Troy nodded, Adam's apple bobbing like a drowning man. "You know what you are going to do?" Colton pressed. Troy swallowed. "Man, I do not. I mean, it was not supposed to. I just drove the truck." Colton leaned in, voice like gravel grinding bone. "Names. Places. Everything." Troy shook, the stench of fear rolling off him. "It was Denny's idea, man. We were just supposed to scare her. Teach her not to snoop." Colton's hand tightened on the edge of the table. It creaked. And when that was not enough, Troy's voice broke. Denny said accidents happen all the time. If she could not keep her mouth shut, better she was not around at all. Colton stared at him, the muscles in his jaw ticking. "And my wife?" he said, voice low. Troy looked away, ashamed. She set it up, man. Said the payout would be worth it." The final nail hammered into place. Colton stood up slowly, looming. "You are going to take me to Denny," he said. "Or you are going to learn what it feels like to be the one left in the dirt." Troy nodded, trembling. The first domino had fallen. And Colton Briggs was not going to stop until the whole damn house came down. They drove through the empty back roads under a bruised sky, Troy squirming in the passenger seat like a worm on a hook. Colton said nothing. The truck rattled down a pothole-ridden road until they reached a clearing. Half-collapsed sheds leaned drunkenly against each other. Old tires burned in a rusted barrel, sending plumes of black smoke into the frozen air. Denny Rawls' private meeting spot. Colton killed the engine and turned to Troy. "You go first. Tell him you want to talk. I will be watching." Troy nodded, sweat slick on his forehead. "Man, you're going to get me killed." "Maybe," Colton said. "Maybe you already got yourself killed." Troy stumbled out of the truck, waving his arms. "Denny. Yo, Denny. Man, I need to talk." A shadow moved near the sheds. Denny Rawls emerged, all leather jacket and cheap bravado. "What the hell do you want, Troy?" he called. Colton watched carefully, every sense sharpened. Troy stammered. "It is bad, man. The girl, she talked to someone. We are in deep." Denny's face darkened. He grabbed Troy by the front of his jacket, shaking him. "You were supposed to handle it." Colton moved silently, circling around the edge of the clearing. The second Denny pulled a pistol from his waistband, Colton struck. The first blow snapped Denny's wrist with a wet crack. The second knocked the gun into the dirt. Denny staggered, spitting curses. Colton grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against the shed wall, hard enough to rattle the boards. "You hurt my daughter," Colton growled. "You helped destroy my family." Denny laughed, blood bubbling on his lips. "You think this ends with me?" Colton leaned closer. "No. It ends when I say it does." He pressed harder. The stars above spun wildly as Denny's struggles weakened. Colton dropped him like garbage, letting him gasp in the dirt. This was just the beginning. The list was long, and he was just getting started. Colton stood over Denny, watching the man writhe in the dirt like a crushed insect. Troy backed away, muttering prayers to a god he probably had not spoken to in years. Colton knelt, yanking Denny up by the jacket. "Names. Everyone involved." "Now." Denny coughed, blood bubbling from his lips. His hand twitched toward the gun lying in the dirt, but Colton kicked it farther away. "You think you are a soldier, old man?" Denny spat. This town belongs to me. Colton tightened his grip until Denny's face turned red. Not anymore. Denny hesitated, then gave a broken laugh. You think killing me will fix her? You think she will wake up whole? Colton pressed him harder against the shed. No, but it will make sure no one else touches her again. Finally, fear cracked Denny's mask. He rattled off names. Big Vince, Troy, who whimpered nearby. A few others Colton had never heard of but would find. Where do they meet? Colton demanded. Denny grunted. Old Mill, east of the highway. Colton released him. Denny crumpled into the dirt. Without a word, Colton turned and walked back to his truck, leaving Troy to scramble after him. He drove in silence, the burned horizon melting into darkness. Every mile closer to the old mill felt like winding a clock toward explosion. Tonight was not about forgiveness. Tonight was about setting fires that would never be put out. The old mill was a carcass from another era, its skeletal beams clawing at the night sky. Broken windows stared like blind eyes. The wind whistled through gaps in the rusted roof. Colton parked a quarter-mile away. He moved through the tree line, boots silent against the frozen ground. Voices floated from inside, low, tense. He knows. We need to get out. No. Denny said we hold the line. The payout is still coming. You saw what he did to Denny. You want that happening to us. Colton crept closer, peering through a shattered window. 3 men huddled around a folding table, guns resting within arm's reach. Maps were spread across the surface, scribbled with locations and numbers. They were planning more. Bigger deals. More victims. Colton's fists curled. He watched, memorizing faces. He needed them to lead him higher. Burn the roots before cutting the branches. Patience. Colton waited until one of them stepped outside to piss. A lanky man with a tattoo of a snake winding up his neck. Colton was on him in 2 strides. A hand over the mouth. A sharp twist of the wrist to silence the gun hand. A whisper in his ear. You are going to deliver a message. The man struggled, whimpered. Colton pressed a knife against his ribs. Tell your boss he is not safe anymore. Tell him hell is coming wearing a soldier's boots. The man nodded frantically. Colton released him and melted back into the darkness. Inside the mill, the others were still arguing. Soon, they would know fear. The kind of fear they had never tasted before. Colton would make sure of it. One ghost at a time. Back at the motel, Colton sat by the window, the locket still in his hand. Marla had not returned. Good. If she had, he was not sure he could have stopped himself from doing something final. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. You think you are scaring us, Briggs? A low voice sneered. You are just one man. We are a goddamn army. Colton smiled, slow and dangerous. Armies fall, he said, and hung up. No threats. No negotiations. Only war. He strapped his old combat knife to his belt, checked his pistol, and pocketed a roll of zip ties. Tonight, he was not playing the waiting game. He was going hunting, and the smell of fear was already thick in the air. He started with the pit. The bartender almost dropped a glass when he saw him stride through the door. Hey man, I told you. Colton walked right up to him, slammed a photo of Piper on the counter. You saw something, Colton said, voice low and sharp. Now you are going to tell me. The bartender swallowed hard. He nodded once, broken. Names. Locations. Weaknesses. They poured out like dirty water. When Colton left, he had a list. Every man who had touched Piper's life with poison. Every man who was about to find out what real fear tasted like. The soldier in him had been sleeping too long. Now it was wide awake. And it was hungry. Colton sat hunched over the grimy motel table. The list of names spread before him like a battle map. Each name had a connection. A weak spot. Some ran drugs. Some laundered money through fake repair shops. Some had blood already staining their hands. He circled the ones closest to Denny, the inner circle. The first name, Russell Kane. Accountant. Quiet. Soft. The one holding the money strings. Colton knew where to find him. Russell was predictable, like most cowards. Every Thursday, he drove to the warehouse district to inspect shipments that barely masked the illegal transfers. Colton parked 2 blocks away and waited. Sure enough, a battered sedan pulled into the lot at exactly 8:17 p.m. Colton watched Russell climb out, adjusting his thick glasses, nervously glancing around. No guards. No backup. Too easy. Colton approached from the shadows, moving with the certainty of a man who no longer cared about consequences. "Russell," he said. The accountant froze, hands shaking, papers fluttering to the ground. I do not want trouble," Russell stammered. "Good," Colton said, voice cold enough to freeze bone. "Then you will tell me what I want to know." He shoved Russell against the car, not hard enough to break him, just enough to remind him what waited if he lied. Within minutes, Russell cracked. Names, account numbers, drop points, secrets that could dismantle Denny's entire operation. When Russell finished, Colton stepped back. "One more thing," Colton said. Russell blinked. "What?" "If you breathe a word of this to anyone, I will not need a second visit." Russell nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face. Colton turned and melted into the night. The paper trail had begun to unravel, and soon it would bury every man connected to Piper's pain. The old Hanley farm sat rotting at the end of a dirt road, swallowed by fields gone wild. Big Vince Hanley lived there now, or squatted, depending on who you asked. Ex-con, muscle for hire, the one who had handled Piper. Colton pulled his truck into the corn rows, hidden from sight. He moved through the tall, whispering stalks, every step slow and deliberate. The barn door hung crooked on one hinge, swaying in the breeze like a broken arm. Inside, the air reeked of mold and old blood. Colton saw Vince through a gap in the boards, slumped on a battered couch, drinking straight from a bottle, shotgun propped nearby. Perfect. Colton waited until Vince staggered toward the door, bottle swinging from his hand. Then he moved. Silent. Swift. The first blow drove Vince face first into the doorframe. The bottle shattered on the floor, forgotten. Vince bellowed, swinging wildly. Colton ducked the clumsy punch and drove a knee into Vince's gut, folding him over. He grabbed the shotgun and tossed it out of reach. Vince gasped, spitting blood. "You remember her?" Colton hissed. "You remember Piper?" Vince froze, recognition dawning in his bleary eyes. I did not mean to." Colton cut him off with a brutal punch, sending Vince sprawling. "No more lies." He dragged Vince to the couch, forcing him down. "You are going to talk," Colton said, voice low. "And if you lie, you are going to hurt." The cornfields outside whispered secrets to the night. Inside, Colton listened carefully as Big Vince finally started telling the truth. And with every word, the noose around Denny Rawls' neck tightened. The pit buzzed with nervous energy when Colton walked in the next night. Conversation stopped. Chairs scraped back. The bartender did not even pretend to smile this time. Colton scanned the room, noting faces. The list was shrinking. Some men had already skipped town. Good. Fear worked faster than bullets sometimes. He moved to the center of the room, voice cutting through the thick air. "Anyone working with Denny Rawls has until sunrise to leave this town." Silence. Then a rough laugh from the back. A heavy-set man stood up, beer sloshing from his glass. "You think you are the law now, soldier boy?" Colton walked toward him, boots thudding against the warped floor. "I am not the law," Colton said. "I am the consequence." The man swung, slow, sloppy. Colton dodged easily and drove a punch into his gut, folding him like paper. The man collapsed, gasping. No one else moved. Colton looked around, making sure every eye met his. "You touched my daughter. You hurt my family. You sold your soul for scraps." He stepped over the groaning man and headed for the door. Outside, the night was cold and clean. Colton breathed it in. The smell of fear was everywhere now, and it smelled just like victory. The night crawled with tension. Colton knew the walls were closing in around Denny's empire. Fear made men stupid. Fear made them reckless. Perfect. He parked the truck outside a rusted diner on the outskirts, neutral ground for small deals and late-night bribes. Inside, 2 men sat in a corner booth, heads low over steaming coffee mugs. One was Mick Sloan, a delivery runner for Denny's cash pickups. The other, Artie Bloom, ran stolen vehicles down south. Colton slipped into a booth near the door, hat pulled low. He sipped black coffee, eyes never leaving them. Mick was jumpy, constantly looking around. Artie kept tapping his foot, fast, nervous. Colton caught snippets of conversation, saying Denny's got eyes everywhere. Man, Briggs is crazy. He put Vince in the hospital, you hear? We should cut and run. Colton smiled behind his cup. Good. Let them bleed themselves out with panic. The diner door creaked open. A heavy-set man in a sheriff's jacket entered. Deputy Cole Madden. Dirty. Bought and paid for by Denny. Cole looked around, spotted Mick and Artie, nodded slightly. Colton tensed. This was not just about beating street thugs anymore. The rot had sunk deeper, into the town's very bones. Colton stood, leaving cash on the table. As he stepped outside, the cold night slapped him awake. If the law itself was compromised, there would be no trials, no confessions, only judgment. And Colton Briggs was ready to deliver it, one sinner at a time. The graveyard at the edge of Marlowe County was silent except for the whisper of the wind through brittle grass. Colton walked between the crooked headstones, boots crunching frost underfoot. He stopped at a grave marked simply, Sergeant William Billy Parker, his oldest friend, his brother-in-arms, killed in action 2 years ago while Colton survived. He crouched, brushing snow from the stone. I know you are watching, Billy, he said softly. I know you would tell me to be smart. He traced the worn lettering with calloused fingers. But they hurt her. They broke everything. I cannot turn the other cheek. The sky above was an endless bruised canvas. The world felt smaller now, colder, meaner. Colton stood, heart heavy but hands steady. He remembered what Billy had said once, in a bunker overseas, laughing between mortar shells. If the law will not protect the ones you love, you become the law yourself. Colton tightened his jacket and turned back toward town. He would not stop. Not until Piper's tears were avenged. Not until the shadows that poisoned this place were burned out of existence. The dead could not fight anymore. But Colton could. And he would. Colton slipped back into town under the thick black sky. The pit was closed now, windows dark, chairs stacked upside down. But across the street, in an abandoned laundromat, Denny's surviving crew gathered like rats in a sinking ship. Colton watched from the alley, studying their movements. 6 men, 3 armed, all desperate. Perfect odds. He moved fast. A broken window. Silent entry. Shadow swallowing him. Inside, the stench of fear was thick enough to taste. He waited until they were mid-argument, shouting about who was to blame, who was going to run first. Then Colton struck. The first man went down with a swift blow to the back of the skull. The second turned, mouth opening in shock, and caught a vicious punch that crumpled him to the floor. Guns clattered. Shouts echoed. Colton disarmed the third with brutal efficiency, snapping the weapon away and driving a knee into his gut. Within minutes, the room was littered with groaning bodies. Colton dragged the ringleader, a wiry thug named Nate, to his knees. You want to live? Colton growled. Nate nodded, eyes wide. Then you are going to deliver a message, Colton said, pulling a folded slip of paper from his pocket. Nate's fingers trembled as he took it. You give that to Denny Rawls, Colton ordered. Tonight. Nate nodded frantically. Colton leaned closer, his voice a razor blade. Tell him he started a war he cannot win. He shoved Nate away and disappeared into the night, leaving behind only fear and the cold scent of defeat. Denny's house of lies was crumbling, and Colton Briggs was lighting the matches. Morning cracked over Marlowe County, but Colton felt no warmth. The town was pretending nothing had changed. Gas stations open, kids rushing to school, old men playing checkers outside the feed store. But beneath that thin layer of normalcy, something rotten pulsed. Colton parked near the old library, across from the one place Marla still visited, Rose's Diner. He watched her through the window, sipping coffee, laughing too loud with a man he did not recognize. She looked untouched by the horror that had swallowed their daughter's life whole. No grief, no regret, only the hungry, desperate smile of someone who thought she had gotten away with it. Colton's fingers drummed against the steering wheel, slow and steady. Then he saw it, the locket. The same silver locket he had found tucked away with her betrayal photos. She wore it openly now, letting the light catch it as she laughed. It was a message, a mockery, and he understood in that moment. Marla was not a pawn in Denny's game. She was a player. Colton leaned back in his seat, anger coiling tight under his skin. There would be no confrontation here. Not yet. First, he would take everything from them, strip them bare in front of the town they thought they owned. Then, he would deal with Marla, face to face, and she would know exactly what it meant to betray a soldier's trust. Night fell heavy over Marlowe County. Colton moved through the dark streets like a ghost, unseen, unstoppable. He pulled up near Denny's main operation, a shell trucking company out by the railroad tracks. It was a front for everything: drugs, money laundering, deals struck in the dark. Tonight, it would be nothing but ash. Colton popped the trunk and retrieved 2 old canisters of gasoline, tools of a different kind of warfare. He slipped through the chain-link fence, poured a gleaming trail from the loading bay to the offices. The stink of gasoline filled the air. Inside the office, papers lay scattered. Invoices, shipment manifests, ledger books scribbled with fake numbers. Evidence. Colton gathered them into a pile, soaking them thoroughly. When he lit the match, he did not flinch as the fire roared to life, hungry and bright. The blaze leapt from file to wall to ceiling, devouring the lies that had poisoned his family. He stood back, watching the flames dance. Sirens would come soon. It did not matter. Colton had already disappeared into the night, a shadow melting away from the chaos he had birthed. Tomorrow, Denny Rawls would wake up to the smell of his empire burning, and Colton Briggs would be one step closer to finishing this war. By dawn, the town buzzed with rumors. The fire at the trucking company was called an accident by the local paper. Faulty wiring, they said. A lie, fed by fear. But Denny knew. Colton saw it in the man's face when they crossed paths outside the courthouse. Denny was sweating despite the cold, eyes darting, jaw clenched tight. Colton leaned against his truck, arms crossed, watching. Denny barked into a phone, pacing like a trapped animal. "No, I do not care. Find him. Find Briggs before he finds us." Too late. Colton smirked under his hat brim. Fear had made Denny sloppy, paranoid. It would not be long before his own men turned on him, desperate to save themselves. As Denny stormed off, Colton slid behind the wheel of his truck, mind already racing. He had rattled the cage. Now the wolves would eat each other alive. All he had to do was wait for the right moment to strike again. And this time, it would be personal. Very personal. Colton stood alone at the edge of town, the wind clawing at his jacket, carrying the scent of smoke from the destroyed trucking yard. The world felt still, like the long breath before a storm. He watched Denny's lieutenants scatter like cockroaches, slipping out of Marlowe County under the cover of darkness. Good. But something still gnawed at him, an itch at the back of his skull he could not scratch. Something unfinished. He replayed every conversation, every clue, every broken promise. Marla. His gut twisted. She had disappeared again. No calls. No visits to the hospital to see Piper. No explanation. Colton climbed into his truck and headed toward the only place that still held answers, Marla's sister's house, on the far side of town. When he arrived, he saw her car parked out front. Inside, through the window, he caught a glimpse of Marla, laughing, drinking, sitting far too close to a man Colton recognized. Denny Rawls. The two of them leaned in, whispering, smiling. Colton's heart turned to stone. She was not being used. She was not a victim. She was part of it. Fully. From the beginning. As he stood there, fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white, a single brutal truth crystallized in his mind. This was never about debts. It was never about fear. It was about greed. Marla had chosen Denny. Chosen to sell out her own daughter for a future paved in dirty money. The betrayal cut deeper than any bullet ever could. Colton stepped back into the shadows, heart pounding. War was never clean. But this This would be personal in a way even he had never imagined. Marla would pay. Every lie. Every scar. She would pay in full. The next morning, Mercy General Hospital buzzed with quiet, anxious energy. Colton pushed through the front doors, his boots heavy against the linoleum floor. He headed straight for Piper's room, heart hammering. If Marla had been willing to betray their daughter once, she might try again. Piper lay sleeping, her bruises fading but her face still pale under the fluorescent lights. Colton sat by her side, gripping her small hand in his. He had almost lost her. He would not let them take another inch. As he sat there, the door creaked open. Marla. She hovered in the doorway, fake sorrow plastered on her face. How is she? Marla asked, voice soft, syrupy. Colton rose slowly. Better than you are going to be, he said. Marla flinched, a flash of real fear crossing her features. I just want to explain, she stammered. Colton shook his head. You explained enough when you chose Denny over your own daughter. Marla's mouth worked soundlessly, scrambling for a defense she did not have. You sold her, Colton said, each word like a hammer blow. You threw her into the wolf's den for cash. Tears welled in Marla's eyes, but Colton saw them for what they were. Self-pity, not remorse. You think you can cry your way out of this, he said, voice rising. Piper stirred in her bed, letting out a soft whimper. Colton turned back to her, breathing deep to calm the fire inside him. When he looked at Marla again, his voice was ice. You are going to leave. Now. And if you ever come near her again, I will bury you myself. Marla stumbled back, her facade crumbling. Without another word, she turned and fled down the hallway, heels clicking in frantic rhythm. Colton sat back down, brushing Piper's hair back gently. The worst betrayals always came from inside the walls you thought were safest. But Piper was safe now. And Colton was not finished. Not by a long shot. 2 nights later, the storm Colton had been waiting for finally broke. A knock rattled the motel door. Colton rose from the table where he had been cleaning his pistol, sliding the weapon into his waistband. He opened the door slowly. It was Troy Lanes, the jittery mechanic who had helped dump Piper at the hospital. Troy looked worse than ever, eyes wild, jacket stained with grease and sweat. You said if I heard anything. Troy panted. Colton stepped aside, letting him in without a word. Troy stumbled into the room, wringing his hands. I overheard Denny and Marla. They are planning to run. Colton's blood ran cold. When? Tomorrow night. After the insurance money clears. They are going to disappear, man. South of the border. Colton nodded slowly, mind already calculating. He had been patient. He had set every piece on the board exactly where he wanted it. Now it was time to strike. Where? Colton asked. Troy swallowed hard. Old barn outside Logan's Creek. They are meeting there to split the cash before they go. Colton's jaw tightened. The barn. The same one where they had once taken Piper, where the nightmare had truly begun. Fitting. Colton reached into the dresser drawer, pulling out a folded map. He marked the barn in red ink, burning the spot into his mind. Thank you, Colton said. Troy nodded quickly, already edging toward the door. Colton watched him go, the motel room falling silent again. Tomorrow, he would end it. Not just for Piper, not just for himself, but for every ounce of loyalty and love that Marla had betrayed. Tomorrow, the reckoning would come, and no one, not Denny, not Marla, would walk away from it. The barn at Logan's Creek was nothing more than a skeleton against the cold, moonlit sky. Broken slats, sagging beams, an old murder of crows roosting silently in the rafters. Colton parked the truck a half-mile down the old dirt road and walked the rest of the way, boots sinking into frozen mud. Every step forward brought back flashes. Piper's bruised face, the broken chain in her hand. The barn was where they had started tearing his world apart. Tonight, it would end. Colton approached from the rear, keeping low. Through a crack in the wall, he saw them inside. Denny pacing nervously, Marla sitting on a hay bale, arms crossed tight against her chest. Between them on the ground, a duffel bag stuffed with cash. Marla's voice cut through the night air. Why are we waiting? We need to move. Denny snarled. We wait for the others. They are bringing the last piece. Marla shook her head. I do not trust them. You do not trust anyone, Denny snapped. Colton's heart pounded, but his hands were steady. Patience. Let them feel safe a few minutes longer. Let the betrayal sit heavy in their blood before he ripped it apart. He moved around the side of the barn, checking the exits. One door. One window. Easy to control. Colton knelt by the doorframe, pressing his ear against the wood. Inside, the argument grew louder, more desperate. Good. Fear would be his weapon tonight, and they had no idea death was already breathing down their necks. Colton waited in the dark, every muscle tight as a coiled spring. He checked his watch. 10 minutes. Then 20. The longer they argued, the more cracks appeared. Denny's voice rose in a panic. Maybe Briggs is already onto us. Marla spat back. You promised me a clean break. You son of a bitch. The old would absorb their hatred, the rafters seeming to lean closer, listening. Colton allowed himself a small, cold smile. They were tearing each other apart without him even stepping through the door. Movement. Marla stood, pacing furiously. She pulled a small pistol from her jacket, waving it at Denny. If he finds us, she hissed, you are the first one catching a bullet. Denny laughed, hollow and broken. You do not have the guts. Colton slipped a hand inside his jacket, fingers closing around the cool grip of his pistol. He could end it now, but something inside him whispered, not yet. They needed to know. They needed to understand exactly who was delivering the verdict. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded note he had given Nate, the one Denny's men had failed to deliver. A simple message, you owe a debt. I am here to collect. Colton unfolded it and slid it under the barn door with a slow, deliberate push. Inside, silence fell. Then the rustle of footsteps. The note scraped across the floorboards as someone picked it up. What the hell is this? Denny growled. Colton waited, breath held. Seconds later, the door creaked open. Denny's face appeared in the gap, confused, angry, afraid. Colton's fist met him squarely, sending him sprawling back into the dirt. Colton stepped inside. No words. No mercy. Tonight was not about talking. It was about justice. And justice wore a soldier's boots. The barn exploded into chaos. Denny scrambled backwards, blood pouring from his nose. Marla screamed, pointing her pistol wildly. Colton raised his weapon, steady and cold. Drop it, he said. Marla's hand trembled. For a second, Colton saw the old version of her, the girl he had once loved. But that girl had died a long time ago. Marla dropped the pistol with a clatter. Colton kicked it aside without taking his eyes off her. Denny tried to lunge for the duffel bag. Colton fired a single shot into the dirt inches from his hand. Move again, Colton said, and I put the next one through your spine. Denny froze. Colton walked forward slowly, each step deliberate, the dirt crunching under his boots. You thought you could buy your way out, Colton said, voice low. Sell my daughter. Burn everything. Walk away clean. Marla sobbed. It was not supposed to happen like that. I just wanted a new life. Colton shook his head. You already had a life. You just did not want to fight for it. He kicked the duffel bag, sending stacks of blood money scattering across the floor. You chose this, he said. Both of you. Marla crumpled onto her knees, begging, weeping. Colton stared at her, the weight of years pressing down. You could have asked for help, he said. You could have stayed and fought. He raised his pistol, aimed squarely between Denny's eyes. But you chose war. And Colton Briggs knew how to end wars. The shot cracked through the barn, echoing into the frozen night. Denny Rawls collapsed, still and silent. Colton turned to Marla, who cowered, whispering prayers to a god she had long since abandoned. Justice was not done yet. Not until every last scar had a reckoning. The barn was still filled with the echo of the gunshot when Marla threw herself at Colton's feet. Tears streamed down her face, ugly and desperate. You do not have to do this, she sobbed. We can leave this behind, Colton. You and me. We can start over. Colton stared at her, unmoved. Start over, he said quietly. Marla clawed at his jeans. We can disappear. I still love you." The words tasted rotten in the air. Colton crouched down, eye level with her, his voice cold and even. "You love the idea of what I could give you," he said. "You love yourself." Marla shook her head wildly, hair flying into her face. "You do not understand," she whimpered. "I was trapped. Denny made promises. He said we could be rich. Free." Colton leaned closer, so close he could smell the stale alcohol on her breath. "You kissed the devil," he said, voice like a blade sliding home. "And now you beg for mercy." He stood, pulling her up roughly by the arm. "No more running. No more lies." Colton marched her toward the truck parked behind the barn. Marla stumbled, crying, but he kept a tight grip on her. This would not end with a bullet. Not for her. Death would be too easy. She would live and face what she had created. Colton drove toward town, headlights cutting through the mist. Tonight, the whole town would know the truth, and Marla would be stripped bare before them all. The Marlow County Sheriff's Department sat under flickering streetlights, a dying monument to justice long abandoned. Colton pulled the truck up to the front steps and yanked the door open. "Get out," he ordered. Marla shook her head, face pale and blotchy. "Please, Colton, please do not." He dragged her out onto the concrete, uncaring of the gasps from onlookers gathered at the diner across the street. Colton kicked the department doors open and shoved Marlo inside. The few deputies inside jumped to their feet, hands twitching near their belts. Colton ignored them. Sheriff Klein, a fat, corrupt man who had turned a blind eye to Denny's crimes for years, lumbered from his office. "What the hell is this, Briggs?" Colton shoved Marla toward him. "This is your accomplice," Colton said, voice steady. "You want evidence? You want a confession? She is the one who sold out her daughter for drug money." Marla wailed, falling to her knees. "It was not me. It was Denny. I did not know." Colton stepped forward, looming. "You knew?" He threw the duffel bag of cash onto the counter. Bills spilled everywhere, tainted by blood and betrayal. The room went dead silent. Colton turned to Klein, staring him down. "You bury this, and you are next." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Klein nodded. Colton stepped back, breathing deep. The poison in this town was bleeding out into the open now, and he was not finished yet. Snow fell hard that night, blanketing the fields and streets in white silence. Colton sat on the bench outside Mercy General, a steaming cup of black coffee in his hands, watching the world drown under the storm. Inside, Piper slept peacefully, finally free of machines and wires. For the first time in weeks, she had smiled when he entered the room. It was a small thing, but it was everything. Colton sipped the bitter coffee, the weight of the past month sitting heavy on his chest. He had been many things in his life: soldier, husband, father. But now he was something else entirely. Something colder, harder, forged by betrayal and grief. The door swung open, and Dr. Jensen stepped out, rubbing his hands for warmth. "She is doing better than we hoped," Jensen said, voice soft. "Physically, she will recover almost completely." "And the rest?" Colton asked. Jensen hesitated. "That will take time." Colton nodded. He could live with that. Time he could give her. Jensen clapped him on the shoulder and disappeared into the night. Colton sat alone, snow dusting his jacket. Not every war ended with a parade. Some ended with a broken man sitting in the cold, knowing the fight would never really leave him. He was fine with that, as long as Piper had a chance. That was all that mattered now. The next morning, the headlines blared across town. Local woman arrested in child endangerment scandal. Drug ring tied to town's elite exposed. Photos of Marla, handcuffed and weeping, splashed across front pages. Denny's dead body found in the barn, ruled an unfortunate accident. Colton stood outside the general store, paper in hand, watching as townsfolk whispered behind cupped hands. Some looked at him with pity, some with fear. It did not matter. He was done hiding. He crumpled the paper and tossed it into the trash. Sheriff Klein had enough evidence now to clean house, if he had the backbone. If not, Colton would be back. He climbed into his truck and pulled onto the highway, the open road stretching wide and endless ahead. Piper's future waited somewhere down that road, and he would build it, one step at a time, with his own hands. The past was buried. The dead had been avenged, but the scars would never leave. Colton touched the broken chain still hanging from his rearview mirror, a reminder of what had been lost, of what had been saved, of what had been fought for, and of the man he had become. Not a hero, not a villain, just a father, a soldier, and sometimes that was enough. The cemetery was quiet, the snow blanketing the crooked graves in a thick, forgiving sheet. Colton stood at the edge of a new hole in the earth, boots planted firm. There was no funeral, no mourners, only a few workmen lowering Denny Rawls into the frozen ground like trash. Colton watched, face unreadable. He had thought revenge would taste sweeter, that it would erase the pain. Instead, it just hollowed him out deeper. Marlo was gone too, transferred to county lockup 2 towns over, awaiting trial she would not escape from. Colton did not feel triumph, only a cold, weary sort of justice. As the last shovel of dirt thudded down, the foreman glanced at Colton, unsure. "You want to say something?" Colton shook his head. There were no words left worth wasting. The workmen left, boots crunching away over the frozen ground, leaving Colton alone. He stayed a few minutes longer, breathing in the sharp, unforgiving air. Then he turned and walked away, never once looking back at the grave. Dead men deserved no memories. Not the ones who hurt children, not the ones who mistook money for life, and certainly not the ones who underestimated a father's wrath. The days that followed passed like smoke. Colton spent most of them at the hospital, sitting by Piper's side as she healed. She was quieter now, eyes sharper. Not broken, no, never broken, but changed. The town, too, had changed. Whispers filled the markets and churches. Some thanked Colton in hushed tones. Others crossed the street when they saw him coming. It made no difference to him. He had not done it for their thanks. He had done it for Piper, for the promises he had made the day she was born. One morning, as he helped her sit up in bed, Piper looked at him, her voice small but steady. "You are not mad at me, are you?" The question stabbed deeper than any knife. Colton knelt beside her, taking her hand in both of his. "No, baby," he said, voice rough. "None of this was your fault." Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded, believing him. That was enough. If the town wanted to call him a killer, a vigilante, a monster, let them. Colton Briggs knew the truth, and the wolves that had prowled Marlowe County for too long had finally been driven into the ground. He could live with that. Spring crept in slow and cautious, like a wounded animal unsure it could trust the sun again. Colton and Piper moved into a small house at the edge of town, far from the whispers and old scars. It was nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, peeling paint, a front porch sagging under its own weight. But it was theirs. Piper helped him paint the walls, choosing bright colors, soft greens, warm blues, colors full of life, not sorrow. They planted flowers outside, hands dirty, faces streaked with sweat and laughter. Every day, Piper grew stronger. Every day, Colton felt the weight of the past lift, just a little. One evening, they sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. Piper leaned her head against his shoulder. "I like it here," she said. Colton smiled, the first real smile in what felt like years. "Me too, kiddo," he said. The wind stirred the chimes above the porch, scattering a soft, bittersweet song into the golden dusk. The past was ashes now, blown away on the wind, and Colton was learning to breathe again. A year later, Marlowe County hardly remembered the fire that had burned through it. New businesses opened. New faces moved in. Old stories faded into rumor, into legend. Colton walked the main street one afternoon, boots scuffing the cracked sidewalk. He nodded to the butcher, tipped his hat to the postmaster. Neither met his eyes. They never did. It did not matter. He was not here for them. He stopped by the general store, picking up supplies for the weekend. Piper had a big project, building a treehouse out back. She had drawn up the plans herself, every detail meticulous. She had his stubbornness and his spirit. As Colton loaded wood and nails into the bed of his truck, He caught a glimpse of himself in the store window. Older, harder, but not broken. Never broken. He climbed into the truck, the broken chain still swinging from the rearview mirror. A reminder, not of revenge, but of the price of love. And the long, hard road home. He started the engine, the rumble of it grounding him. Tomorrow would bring more work, more healing, more living. And Colton Briggs was ready. Finally, Colton was hammering the last plank onto the treehouse frame when he heard the truck pull up. He wiped sweat from his brow and glanced down the driveway. Two men stepped out, city men, suits too crisp for Marlow County, eyes too sharp. FBI. Colton's gut tightened, but he said nothing. He climbed down from the ladder slow and steady, like he had all the time in the world. Mr. Briggs? The taller one asked, flashing a badge. Colton nodded. I am Agent Whitaker. This is Agent Shaw. We are investigating the events tied to the Rawls case. Mind if we ask you a few questions? Colton wiped his hands on a rag. You can ask. Whitaker exchanged a glance with Shaw. We are hearing some stories, Mr. Briggs. Stories about vigilante justice. About certain disappearances. Colton shrugged. Sounds like rumors. Shaw stepped forward. We take matters of extrajudicial punishment seriously. Colton met his gaze head-on. You take a man's daughter, leave her for dead, and maybe you will understand. The agents shifted, uncomfortable. Whitaker cleared his throat. For what it is worth. Off the record, some folks believe you did the right thing. Colton said nothing. They stood there a moment longer, the air thick with things that would never be said. Finally, Whitaker nodded. Take care of yourself, Mr. Briggs. They climbed back into their truck and disappeared down the road. Colton turned back to the treehouse, hammering nails into the wood with slow, methodical strikes. The lock could circle all it wanted. Colton had already made peace with the man he had become, and nothing they said would ever change that. Piper climbed the ladder to the unfinished treehouse, her small hands sure and steady. Colton watched from below, pretending not to hover. You sure you got it? He called. Piper grinned down at him. I am not made of glass, Dad. He chuckled, pride swelling in his chest. She was healing, not just in body, but in spirit. Later, they sat together on the porch, eating grilled cheese sandwiches and laughing at a squirrel trying, and failing, to climb their new bird feeder. Piper leaned into him, warm and safe. I do not remember much, she said softly. About that night. Colton swallowed, the sandwich suddenly dry in his throat. You do not have to, he said. But sometimes, I get flashes, Piper whispered. Like someone grabbing me. Loud voices. Cold dirt. Her hands trembled slightly. Colton wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. You are safe now, he said. No one will ever hurt you again. Piper nodded against his chest. The sky burned gold and pink above them. Colton closed his eyes, breathing her in. A father knows many things. When to fight, when to forgive, when to hold on with everything he has. And he knew, without doubt, that Piper would find her own strength again, just like he had. The first time Piper returned to the diner, the scene of 100 happy breakfasts and one forgotten nightmare. Colton stayed outside, engine running, eyes locked on the door. It had been her idea. I need to do this, she had said, voice steady. He had not argued. Inside, Piper sat at the counter, same spot they always had. The waitress, a kind-eyed woman named Lucy, brought her pancakes, extra syrup, just like before. Piper's hands shook a little as she picked up the fork. But she ate, bite after slow bite. Outside, Colton gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. When Piper finally emerged, a to-go box in her hands, she looked taller somehow. Stronger. Colton stepped out of the truck, meeting her halfway. Good pancakes, he asked, voice rough with pride he could not hide. Piper grinned up at him, sunlight catching in her hair. The best. He opened the door for her, and she climbed in without hesitation. As they drove away, Colton realized something important. Healing was not about forgetting. It was about facing the memories that stung and taking their power back. One morning at a time. One small victory after another. Days later, a letter arrived. Plain envelope. No return address. Colton knew before he opened it who it was from. Marla. The words were scrawled, desperate. I am sorry. I made mistakes. I was scared. I loved you. I loved her. Please believe me. Colton read it once. Then again. Then he folded it carefully and fed it to the wood stove, watching the flames devour the lies. Forgiveness was not a right. It was not something you earned with a few tear-stained words scribbled from a prison cell. It was something built brick by brick, day by day, and Marla had shattered that foundation long ago. Colton tossed another log onto the fire and sat back, feeling the warmth creep up his legs. Piper was out back, hammering boards onto the treehouse, laughing when the hammer slipped and she dropped a nail. Life was messy, imperfect, but still beautiful. He was not wasting another second on ghosts. Not when there was so much life still left to fight for. The sun rose over the horizon, casting a golden light across the backyard. Piper sat cross-legged on the porch, papers spread around her like fallen leaves. Blueprints. Colton stepped outside, coffee steaming in his hand, watching her work. You redesigning the White House, he teased. Piper laughed, a full, honest laugh, and shook her head. I am making the treehouse better, she said, tapping her pencil against the plans. It needs a trapdoor, and maybe a secret escape rope. Colton raised an eyebrow. Expecting invaders? You never know, she said with a mischievous grin. He sipped his coffee, hiding the sudden sting behind his eyes. She was coming back to life, piece by stubborn piece, and she was carrying his spirit with her. You want help? He asked. Piper beamed. Only if you can follow directions. Colton chuckled and sat down beside her, peering over her shoulder. The lines were shaky, the measurements off by a mile, but it was a masterpiece. Because it was hers, and because it meant she was dreaming again. Together, they redrew the plans, the mornings slipping away in laughter, sawdust, and stubborn debates about pulley systems and secret compartments. Colton did not care if they built a lopsided box held together with hope. It was hers. It was theirs. And it was the foundation for something far stronger than anything he had ever built in his old life. Late that night, after Piper had fallen asleep surrounded by blueprints and markers, Colton stood in the bathroom, staring into the mirror. The face that looked back at him was a stranger and an old friend all at once. Lines carved deep by years of war, heartbreak, and blood. Eyes that had seen too much and refused to look away. He touched the scar along his jaw, a gift from a firefight halfway across the world. Funny, he had thought that scar would be the worst he ever carried. He leaned closer, seeing something else now. A hardness. Yes, but something softer too. A flicker of hope where only rage had lived for so long. He did not know what the future would bring. He had made too many enemies, spilled too much blood. But for once, he was not afraid. He could live with the man he saw. He could live for Piper. Colton turned off the light and stepped into the quiet house, the creak of the floorboards under his boots a lullaby instead of a battle cry. The war was over. It was time to build something worth fighting for. The day of the town's spring festival dawned bright and sharp. Piper bounced around the kitchen, braiding her hair and picking at the pancakes Colton had made. You sure you want to go? He asked, heart squeezing tight. Piper nodded, eyes clear. I am not hiding anymore. Colton smiled, pride cutting deeper than any wound. They drove into town, the streets lined with booths and colorful banners. At first, people stared. Whispers followed them like shadows. But Piper walked tall, shoulders back, smile wide. Colton stayed a few steps behind, letting her lead. It was her test, not his. They wandered between food stands and games, Piper giggling when she beat him at ring toss, crowing when she won a giant stuffed bear almost as big as she was. When a group of girls from her school spotted her, Piper hesitated, just a flicker. Then she marched up, head high. Colton watched as they welcomed her with shy smiles and awkward hugs. He leaned against a lamppost, arms crossed, heart fit to burst. She was doing it, facing the world that had once broken her, and winning. When she came running back, cheeks flushed with laughter, Colton ruffled her hair. You ready to go? He asked. Piper shook her head fiercely. Not yet. I have a lot of living to catch up on. Colton laughed, pure and full, and let her pull him back into the crowd. The past was a scar, but the future was wide open. And it was beautiful. That night, as the town settled back into silence and stars scattered across the dark sky, Colton and Piper sat by the backyard fire pit. The broken chain, the one Piper had clutched the night she almost died, dangled from his hand. He turned it over, feeling the roughness, the weight. "It used to hurt," Piper said quietly. Colton looked at her. "Now it reminds me," she continued, "that I survived." Colton nodded slowly. She reached out and took the chain from him. Without a word, she tossed it into the fire. The metal hissed and blackened, swallowed by the flames. They watched it burn side by side. No chains left, no ghosts clinging to their heels. Just two survivors, building a life out of ashes. Piper leaned her head against his shoulder. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. Colton closed his eyes, breathing her in. "I love you too, baby," he said, voice rough with everything he could never put into words. Above them, the stars turned. The fire crackled and roared. And for the first time in a long, long time, Colton Briggs was free. The treehouse stood finished under the early summer sky, its walls painted a riot of color. Colton sat on the porch, coffee cooling in his hand, watching Piper hang a sign over the little front door. "Fort Freedom." He smiled, heart tugging hard. Piper clambered down the ladder and plopped onto the steps beside him, face flushed with pride. "It is done," she said, beaming. Colton nodded. "It is perfect." She swung her legs, barefoot and carefree. For a while, they sat in companionable silence, the wind whispering through the trees. "You know what I realized?" Piper said, her voice thoughtful. Colton tilted his head. "You do not have to be the strongest person to survive," she said. "You just have to keep moving forward, even if you are scared." Colton looked at her, pride swelling so sharp it hurt. "You are the strongest person I know," he said quietly. Piper grinned and bumped his shoulder with hers. "You too, Dad." They sat there as the sun dipped lower, bathing the yard in soft gold. Colton thought about everything they had survived, the betrayals, the violence, the darkness that had tried to swallow them whole. And here they were, still standing, still fighting, still living. It was not about the house or the town or even the treehouse. Home was this. Home was them, built not with perfect walls or clean slates, but with stubborn hope, unconditional love, and the blood-and-bone promise that no matter how bad the world tried to break them, they would rebuild. Together. Always. That evening, they built a fire in the backyard again, roasting marshmallows and laughing until their bellies ached. Piper tucked her legs under her on the old lawn chair and stared into the flames. "Do you ever think about what happened?" she asked, voice small but steady. Colton stirred the fire with a stick, watching the embers dance. "Sometimes," he said honestly, "but I try not to live there anymore." Piper nodded, eyes shining. "Me too." The stars came out, pricking the black sky with silver. Colton leaned back, breathing in the cool night air. The chain was gone. The fear was gone. And in its place was something fierce and unbreakable, a bond that no evil could touch. A life worth living. If there was one lesson written through every scar, every lost night, every battle fought in silence, it was this. You do not measure strength by how much pain you can take. You measure it by how much love you are willing to protect, even when the world tries to tear it away. And that love, that stubborn, defiant love, was stronger than anything hate could build. Colton turned to Piper, smiling. "You ready for tomorrow?" he asked. She nodded. "Bring it on." They sat in the flickering glow, two warriors scarred but undefeated. The fire burned low, but the hope between them burned higher than ever. Final message to the audience. Before you go, I want to ask you something real. What does home mean to you? Is it a place? A person? A feeling you fight for no matter what? Tell me in the comments below. I would love to hear your story. Also, if you felt even one emotion during this journey, if you were hooked, if you felt the anger, the heartbreak, the hope, please like the video, subscribe for more epic revenge thrillers, and hit the bell icon so you never miss another powerful story. Milt Hain next thriller and epic revenge story Main. Tab Tak Apna Kyle Rachna.